everyone. Thanks so much for joining me for this week's episode of When I Grow Up. On today's episode, it is my pleasure to welcome Jinny Choe. Hi, Jinny. How are you?
Hi. Thank you, Blair, for having me. It's great.
Oh, no, it is my pleasure. And actually, just so that everyone knows, it is Dr. Jinny, but she has been so kind to and asked me to refer to her as just Jinny. And I just feel like already you just want to break those barriers between us, right? Of
yeah, let's get rid of any unnecessary boundaries.
Yeah. All that to say, Jinny is here because she is a pastoral counselor. And I honestly don't know what that title really means, but I'm excited to hear more about what she does, what her day-to-day is, and just hear about how she came into counseling in itself. And actually, Jinny, we have had a marriage and family therapist on before, but I would assume that is different. Is that right?
It is different.
Okay.
So the difference between a marriage family therapist and what I do is basically I bring in psychology with theology. So I'm bringing a lot about the spiritual life of each client that I see. And so some of the training is similar. I've also had psychological theories and marriage and family therapy background as well. But my degree also included a whole lot of theology.
Okay. Okay. So this is interesting to me. So for one, I didn't even know pastoral counseling was an actual type of counseling.
Yeah, it's not as common.
Okay.
Absolutely not. A lot of the people that go through the same training as me also end up licensed as a marriage and family therapist. So there's some overlaps.
I see. So could you tell me a little bit more about, you said you had a lot of theology background too. So how does that incorporate are you saying you were trained as a pastor would be trained or okay?
I went to seminary. So I went to Princeton Theological Seminary, got my MDiv, and I was actually a children's pastor for 14 years.
Oh, no kidding. Okay, so we're going to have to talk. I'm a children's pastor currently.
Oh, great.
And I'm 14 years. That's crazy. Okay. Okay.
Yes. It's a long time.
Okay, so after that, then what happened?
I wanted to do more than just be a pastor because what I realized was even in children's ministry, but also in families that I was taking care of and serving, I saw a lot of generational divide and strife and trauma and pain, and they didn't know how to handle that. And I felt that my MDiv degree was not enough to help them. I didn't know what to do. I was just like, oh, let me pray for you, and not to, belittle prayer. Prayer is very important. But I wanted to know actual skills to help reconcile, help them grow together as a family. And so then I went into chaplaincy for about 2 years because I wanted to learn more about spiritual care. But after that, I was in the emergency department for a while, and I realized, I don't like the hospital setting. There's a lot of death and trauma.
Right,
and I was in, children's healthcare for a while, and so it was really devastating to see children die and be ill, and this isn't for me.
Right, because I would imagine chaplaincy, you're seeing people kind of in they request a chaplain, I would imagine, in their darkest times when things get really tough. And man, okay, so it wasn't for you.
It really wasn't. I tried for 2 years. I really dove into it, but I felt my soul kind of struggling with all the trauma and pain that I saw. And I realized as I gave care, I wanted more of a long-term care relationship with the people that I was seeing. And so then that kind of opened the door for counseling. But I didn't want to go the regular secular counseling route. and I wanted to go into a program that was very culturally sensitive, because a lot of what my concerns were for Korean American communities anyway.
Mm.
So yeah, I wanted to go to a program that was open to that. And I found a program at Emory that was a doctorate of theology for pastoral counseling.
Oh,
So I'm like, oh,
wow.
that sounds good. I'll try that.
Yeah, yeah. I want to ask you more about your experience at
Mm-hmm.
Emory. But before that, I just to backtrack a little bit, you were
Mm-hmm.
mentioning, this generational gap and divide
Yeah.
that you were witnessing. And just to clarify, were you at a Korean immigrant church at the time?
I think the gap that I noticed started with my dad and myself when I was growing up as a
Ah.
teenager, right? My father was also a pastor. And
Mm,
so he was very first gen mindset of obey me, church is everything.
mm,
Uh, there's no room for other opinions.
mm.
And I was very silenced. But I'm not a silent type. I'm very much like, here are my opinions. I think you're wrong. And my dad would be like, why are you talking back to me? Why are you so rude? But really, when I recall those times in my life, I think there was a 5-year period where my dad and I just did not talk normally. It
Mm,
was all just like fighting or yelling and tensions. And I think that's not an uncommon story for a lot of people in Asian American communities, cultural barrier, language barrier, all those things.
mm,
But then when I entered into, working in a Korean American church, I saw that play out so many times with the kids, with the youth group, with even college students. This inability to connect with our parents' generation because there was a block between just like emotionally not being able to feel heard and safe. And a lot of just tension that we see in the family is being replicated in the church, right? Like the first
right.
generation leaders and the EM second gen leaders, there's always this kind of like conflict and
Mm,
tension of how we do ministry. And I'm like, this is a systemic problem. It's not just a
mm.
simple family by family. This is a general trend that's happening. And
Interesting. Yeah.
I also found that it's not just the Korean American community, it's also in other Asian American communities as well, because of the immigrant story and cultural gaps between the generations. And so there's a lot of pain in our community, that goes unaddressed, unhealed, and it comes out in very toxic ways sometimes.
Mm,
Yeah. And so that's kind of what led me to think about, there's not a lot of people doing something about this. They mark and say, here's a problem, but there's no follow through. Right? Like, what are we gonna
yeah. No, that's interesting that you
do?
say that because I feel like maybe some of us feel like we're doing something, but we're
Mm-hmm.
just kind of uh doing quick fixes. Like just somebody that's been in ministry for a long time. I think yeah, like I mean Christian word that I would use is discipleship, right? Like this discipleship relationship is supposed to be a long-term thing. Those kinds of healing processes are supposed to be happening if things are going well
Mm-hmm.
and doing it right. But I think what you just said, yeah, I don't disagree with it because it is like I think there's a lot of we try to like we want to hurry and fix it quickly. Um but yeah, that's really so you
Yeah,
found that this
I
when
think
you
a lot
started
of
the
what
program,
you're.
were you
Uh-huh.
like, this is it? Or
Um, Maybe it also helps to kind of go back and talk about what made me think about joining the program a bit more. I moved to Atlanta about, I want to say 11 or 12 years ago. And
okay.
that was around the time when there was a lot of shootings within the Korean American community.
Mm,
Um, there was like an entire family that was murdered by a family member inside a sauna somewhere. And then there were like pastor's wife shooting her husband. And, it was just like so tragic and violent. And it was a shock because that kind of extreme events don't really happen much, or we don't hear much about it in our community. And I think the kind of heart I felt was just, there are no resources for people like that. For families who are grieving or trying to understand what happened. And I think going back to kind of the point you were making, when they do turn to community leaders like pastors or other community leaders, they kind of want to put a Band-Aid on that, right? Like, oh yeah, let's kind of calm it down. Let's move forward. Let's not dwell on the pain. It's a very kind of, let's cover it up and move forward.
And that's not to say all pastors, just in general.
Absolutely. There are some really excellent pastors out there who are well trained. But I guess I saw more pastors kind of not also know what to do in those kind of situations. They didn't get adequate training for how to go into walking with people in severe mental distress or emotional kind of pain. And so I wanted to learn more and see, okay, is there any way that I can help heal a community move forward? Not just by kind of covering it up, but going to the root of the issue. Do more deeper surgery rather than kind of, put a Band-Aid on it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, well, I wanted to be okay. Actually, no. Let's go into the program a little bit. So, you decided to go to school at Emory for this counseling. Is it a degree?
It is a degree.
Okay.
Unfortunately, they are canceling the degree.
Oh my! Is it unpopular or what?
Apparently, it doesn't bring in a lot of money for Emory.
I see.
So I think it's a financial decision.
Let's be real here, 100%.
Yeah, it's all about the money.
Okay. So, but do you happen to know if there are other programs similar to this?
I think there are other doctorate programs that focus more on like practical theology, which means they don't do the clinical side of it, but they do more theory.
Okay.
And other schools who offer like biblical counseling, let's say, or other ways like that. But I'm not sure if there is a degree that's exactly the same as what I went through.
I see. Okay, so the program at Emory, though, specific to you, what was it like? Like, how long is the program for you and stuff like that?
It took me 5 years to complete the doctorate program. And as soon as you enter into the program, you have to do 2 years of clinical practicum, which means you start seeing clients right away.
I see.
So they are partnered with a counseling center. And so you become a resident counselor in that center. And you get supervised, and it's kind of the same route as other therapists go through. And at the same time, you also start taking classes that are also psychologically theory-based, but also theology. So it's a mix of secular theory for psychology as well as the theological part of it.
Okay, I see. And was it challenging for you? Like, what was like, was there a point, maybe like during clinicals, did you enjoy it or?
They threw us in the fire. So I met with other friends who went through like a graduate program for counseling.
Okay.
The way they describe their journey is very much like we're taught how to, like what questions to ask, what to follow up on. And they even have like mock kind of models of like practicing with one another. We didn't get any of that. We were just put it, here's your first client. And my first client, I have no background in counseling whatsoever. I mean, I have chaplaincy and, being a pastor for a long time, but he walks in and the first thing he says is, I hate my wife. What do I do?
Oh no.
But I think they follow this model of learn as you
Right.
so I felt really bad for my first few clients because I had no idea what I was doing. Um, but I learned very quickly.
Right. Oh my
Okay.
goodness.
Uh-huh.
So like, and then, okay, as you're learning these things, like, are
Mm-hmm.
there like classes that teach you how to do
That's it.
this? Or
So we learn theory as we're doing it. So it becomes a very theory and rubber meets the road kind of practice
I see.
immediately.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's really like, actually, I kind of like that kind of learning, honestly.
Uh-huh.
But
Uh-huh.
it's very like hands-on, real practice. Man, I wonder why they do it like that. Is
I
it just,
think people want you to kind of just immerse yourself in it without feeling
mm,
like I have to know something. It really forces you to confront your limitations and ego, like immediately. Oh, I am nothing. I
yeah.
know nothing. It's
Oh
very good for
man.
that.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Okay, so like after the 2 years of you said that the first 2 years you're doing clinicals. And so
Mm-hmm.
after that, what is it that you guys focus on?
After the 2 years of clinical, we do a comprehensive exam. It's almost like the PhD. So
Okay,
after
okay.
2 years of coursework and practicum, we have this huge exam proving that you can be a candidate to be to have this degree to go on.
I see. I
So then
see.
it's like five huge exams that you have to write essays all day for.
Oh gosh.
And then after that, you do your research study,
Mm-hmm.
and then you write a dissertation.
I
Mm-hmm.
see.
And that
Okay.
takes about 2 to 3 years. Yeah.
Okay. The dissertation itself takes 2 to 3 years.
Well, it's pretty much a book. So actually, I'm working on my dissertation to be published in a few months. And so it took me 2.5 years to do the research and to write it. And so now I'm just editing it.
Oh wow. Can I
Yeah.
ask what your dissertation is on?
Yeah, it's on. So the title is Opening the Red Door because my counseling practice is called Red Door Ministry. And the
Oh.
subtitle is Pastoral Counseling for Second Generation Korean Americans.
So your practice
Mm-hmm.
it is very specific then.
I also see clients who are not Korean Americans,
Uh-huh.
but majority of them tend to be Asian Americans.
I see. I see. So
Mm-hmm.
and that's like on
Uh-huh.
purpose for you.
I think a lot of my clients come from word of mouth.
Uh-huh.
I don't
Uh-huh.
necessarily market or, try to look for clients. And
Sure.
so they happen to be mostly Korean Americans who
Okay.
kind of share with other Asian friends. Mm-hmm.
Um but I guess that's probably God because I mean that's what the heart I mean that's the heart he gave
Mm-hmm.
you, right?
Yeah,
To
I
bring
think that's
out
what
these
started.
and so in your clinicals you weren't counseling just Korean
Mm-mm.
Americans during
Actually, I
that
never
time.
counseled Korean Americans. I was counseling everyone. Yeah.
Um
White people, black people, people from the Latinx community, everyone. Yeah. Uh-huh.
and just out of like my own curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
like have you found that these wounds that or baggage that people carry are different throughout different cultures or
Hmm.
different ethnicities?
I think there's a different way they are expressed.
Mm.
So a lot of the kind of themes, if I think about it, come from not feeling loved, not feeling good enough. Mm, Confused as to what people expect of them.
Mm.
Um, yeah, those things are pretty common. It's a universal, I think, human need that points to our brokenness, right? Like we
Mm.
need love, we need to be heard, we need to feel empowered somehow.
Mm.
But because of circumstances or wounds, we're all broken. but it's the cultural kind of ways that gets expressed is different. So I think it's kind of like, if I can use a weird metaphor here, we all like ice cream, but we all like different flavors of ice cream. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like we all need something, but because of our cultural differences, we prefer it given through a strawberry flavor rather than if someone gave us pistachio, we would reject it, right? Because it's still ice cream, but it's kind of, it doesn't fit well with my kind of and wants and desires, let's
I
say.
see. Okay. No, that's a great
Uh-huh.
example, a great metaphor. I get that. I love ice cream, but I definitely don't like the same ice creams as other people. Yeah, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
That was just for my own personal
Oh,
questioning,
that's
but
a great question. Yeah.
um so okay. Um I usually ask this at the top of the interview, but I got
Mhm.
so into what it is that you were saying. But I wanted to know what is your day to day like, Jinny? Like, what does it
Uh,
look like for you as a
yeah.
pastoral counselor?
I am really lucky in that I have a pretty free schedule. I am my own boss, which is
Mm,
great. So I wake up, I either go for a run, do some yoga, and then I eat something, and then I write or edit for a couple hours. And then I start seeing clients afternoon time until evening time. And then I eat dinner and then I go to sleep.
sounds great.
It is very nice to be your own
Yeah.
boss.
Yeah. So has that schedule shifted or changed at all since COVID and the pandemic hit?
It's I've gotten more clients for sure. I think the pandemic has raised more anxieties, uncertainties, and fears. And so I now have more clients than I used
Interesting.
to. And now it's a matter of me drawing some lines for my own self care because
Mm,
it's unfortunate, but I can't see everyone that reaches out to me because I simply don't have the availability and the time.
mm.
Yeah. And so it would also be unfair if I were to see like 10 clients a day, then each client, I would just be exhausted and just kind
Yeah.
of like, sure, whatever.
Yeah.
I want
No,
to be fully present, with
yeah,
all of the people that
absolutely.
I am trying to sit with.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, usually, how long are your client meetings?
So with each client, they decide whether they want to do a 50-minute session or an hour and a half. And each day I see between 3 to 4 clients.
Okay. Um, those increments are kind of weird to me. 50 minutes or an hour and a half. Is there a
Uh-huh.
purpose to that?
So traditionally, I think 50 minutes is the typical therapeutic hour. That's kind of what it
Oh,
is. And what I mean by hour and a half, I also mean I'm actually meaning an hour and 20 minutes. So usually when counselors schedule people, they try to schedule them at the top of the hour, right? So 8, 9, 10. So the 10-minute buffer is for the counselor to kind of regroup, process a few things, get ready for the next client, that kind of.
interesting. That's like, I don't know. It's like a fun fact, I feel like.
Background information
Yeah.
on what counselors do.
If you're thinking about being a counselor.
uh,
No, but for sure. Okay. So, what is the difference between a counselor and like a psychologist? Or is there,
yeah. So I think people get confused between counselor, therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist.
yes,
Like it all seems to be kind
I've,
of all melting into one. So psychiatrists need a medical degree because they are able to prescribe medication,
okay.
and they also do consultation or some type of counseling talk therapy. Psychologists are not able to prescribe medication. You know what? That's what I think, but things may have changed. But they focus more on a set psychological theorist that they're following, and
Okay.
it's very kind of like there's a set kind of therapy that they follow, like a model or method. And I think counselors or therapists, they are very similar, but they're more kind of relational focused, and they also do follow some theory. But I think this is where the confusion is, right? Psychologists tend to go deeper into the psychology of it.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
That helps. Whereas I think counselors and therapists tend to be more, like trying to be more focused on the healing aspects
I
or
see what you're saying. Okay. So it's like the psychology of it is
level.
what you mean is like there are reasons behind how you're feeling, but then the counselor or therapist maybe is trying to not
Use that to
psychoanalyze it, but oh, sorry,
there's so
sorry.
many different therapists and psychologists who also are very kind of, it overlaps. So it's confusing for me too because I'm in the field, but to distinguish that clearly, I don't know if I have the right words to do it.
It's okay. I understand that it's hard to articulate. But then let me simplify it a little bit. So for you as a counselor, what is your goal? Like what would be like what would make you feel I don't know, like does counseling ever end for people? Like how does that work?
I think the framework I use personally is I want people to be proactive agents in their life rather than be passive to the circumstances that they found themselves in. And so, however I can help them get there, however long it takes for them to say, it's useful for me to come see you, Jinny, as I am reclaiming, feeling more empowered, all of those things. So I've had clients who come for less than 10 sessions, and their goal was to alleviate some of these symptoms of anxiety or depression. And as it goes away, they're like, okay, our goals are met. I'm like, great. Do you want to continue or not? It's like, I think we're good. Great. Go for it. Whenever you want to come back, I'm available. Then I have other clients I've seen for 6 years, and so it's kind of in those cases, I'm walking with them in the day to day, whatever the frequency that we need is, right? Like, so I touch in every 2 weeks or a month, and they tell me what's going on in their lives, and they need someone to process that with, or feel like they need a different perspective on what's going on.
Sure.
So it really depends on what they are looking for.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I guess in my head, I just know what I see on TV, right? And it's like they're just like until like I mean, you're referring to while you were in school, you guys learned different methods and stuff like that. I mean, is counseling a lot of listening, or is it a lot of talking during your sessions, or?
One of my first supervision sessions with my supervisor, when I, was thrown in the fire with the client, I came in and said, I asked a lot of questions. Is that all I'm doing? Is that all I'm supposed to be doing? And he looked at me straight in the eye and goes, pretty much, yes. Just keep asking, just ask clarifying questions.
Okay.
But my way of doing it is a little different. I don't know if it's the 14 years of being a pastor.
Sure, yeah, probably.
But, like, I do ask a lot of questions. But I also realized the cultural difference between Asian Americans and other Americans that I sat with is that Asian Americans feel more comfortable with a slightly more directive counselor. So I have, white clients who they just come in and spend the whole 50 minutes. They're leading the whole session. And I'm just like, And then they would pause and be like, Jinny, what do you think about this? Right? Or what's your input?
Okay.
Whereas I think culturally, Asian Americans are raised to be more kind of silent or aware of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I feel like I have to almost kind of draw it out of them a little bit more.
Mm.
And this is a huge, almost frowned upon method, I think other counselors are taught, but I use it anyway. I use my own story sometimes to kind of say, does this sound familiar to you? Like, is this the kind of experience you're trying to talk about? And they're like, that's exactly what it is. Or they're like, definitely not. That is definitely
Yeah.
not what I'm talking about. But whatever it is, it causes conversation, right? Like, it
Yeah,
causes them to
yeah.
talk about it. And so I find myself sometimes talking a bit, but I always check in, like, am I talking too much? I can shut up now if you want.
Right, right, right.
They're like, yeah. No, this is good. So,
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I guess I just was curious about that too, because um, I'm wondering if there are people that are listening now to this podcast and thinking, is this something that I would be interested in? And I don't know if you needed to be a good listener or a good talker or like, some of those traits of one's own personality.
I think listening is definitely key. But how do we use the listening to join in with the other person? And how did I help them feel that I am with them and that they can trust me? So whatever that involves, yeah, whether that is the more listening in, checking in, or sharing a bit more than maybe other counselors might.
Right, yeah. Oh gosh, because just somebody that has been in working in the ministry aspect of church for quite, I guess, a little while now. Um, as you're talking, I'm like, this seems like something I would like. Pastoral counseling, but also very daunting because, like you said, a lot of writing and dissertation. I'm like, nah, I don't know about that.
Actually, there in Georgia at least, if you have an MDiv degree,
Uh-huh.
you can use that as a base to get licensed as a family marriage therapist, marriage and family therapist.
Oh,
And so you
wow.
just need to kind of go back to school and get some of those coursework done. But that can serve as a base for you to kind of do that.
Oh, wow. I didn't
Last
know
time I
that.
checked. Yeah, but
Yeah.
things always change.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That's cool. Um, Jenny, if I could kind of, if it's okay with you, I wanted to ask you some questions that are kind of not relevant to what it is that you do, but I feel like your perspective would be very insightful for those listening and even for me. So it's kind of like my own excuse to ask you something as a counselor. But yeah, I mean, like, just a couple of days ago, there was a big shooting in Atlanta, and Asian women were targeted in this shooting. And I actually, so I'm an external processor by nature, and the last couple of days have been interesting for myself, right? Just kind of working through this and seeing how I feel about it. My background and story growing up is a lot different than a lot of other immigrant families, only because my parents immigrated here in middle school. So I actually grew up in a we spoke English at home, and that was my background. So it's a little bit different, I think, than everybody else's, that or a lot of people that I know. Anyways, all that to say, I was kind of, even before, actually right before talking to you this evening, I was processing some things about what has happened and what is happening to our community
Yeah.
with my husband. And yeah, there were some disagreements, actually, even just between us. And it's hard for me, honestly, to articulate everything right now
Yeah.
in a way that I feel like would be cohesive.
I think so.
However,
It's only been a couple of days. Yeah.
yeah, but however, I just am curious, like, to know. how you feel about the response that is
Mm.
being seen through social
Mhm.
media and people's
Mhm.
like reaction to it.
Hmm. I think I'm in the space of still processing the shock of what happened. Anytime a tragedy of this sort happens, my heart and soul kind of reels from the evil of it. Death that comes from such hate, and being targeted for our, whether it's race or gender or both, right? Like it's such a, I don't know, I feel that as an evil thing. Like that's dehumanizing completely. That we're no longer people, we are objects of some sort. And that has always bothered me about racism and sexism in general. But in this particular incident, I was shocked to see how even just the police responded about, kind of humanizing the shooter as, oh, it was a hard time for him and he was having a bad day. And I'm thinking, why are we not hearing about who these human beings were who were killed? They're having a bad day. Like their family's definitely having a bad day. Like it's such a deep-rooted problem in American society to paint the other in a very flat, stereotypical way. And that can be very dangerous. I mean, deadly, really, if we're talking about in those terms. And so I think it's time, it has been time for the Asian American community to speak out more. I think back to my point of we are kind of raised to be more silent, right? Like we're not really given a lot of opportunities, even at home, to speak out, right? Like we grew up in a very Confucius kind of like, weigh your elders and respect them. So our opinions are not as valued sometimes. But I think now we can't afford to stay silent anymore, right? Like, so what is happening is this kind of we're people too, right? Like see us as human beings, and that's the demand of it. Earlier today, I was talking to my sister about this, and my sister was really upset because she belongs to like a mom's group. She's all the way out in California, but still, she's saying to her group, like, could this organization put out a statement, right, to say like we support our Asian American sisters in this? And because her group has a lot of Asian women in it, she's like, I think this organization needs to speak out somehow. But when she reached out to the leaders of that organization, they were silent for like 5 hours. Like they didn't get back to her. And the anger my sister felt, like, how do you not see I'm traumatized here? Like, this is serious stuff that we need to address, and it would help to feel at least supported, seen, heard, that this is happening, and that we have to be more almost hyper vigilant in being aware of the dangers of being an Asian woman in this country, And so she really, like, we had to really sit down and process that too. I think what it comes down to for me is people don't do the hard work of confronting their own biases. So even in our Asian American community, right? I don't know if this is fair to say, but let's be real. Koreans are pretty racist. Right?
No, yes. And I mean, again, like at the risk of someone being upset about my statements, but like full disclosure, I was telling my husband right before we got to chatting just now, like, I mean, I would be hypocritical, in saying that I didn't have my own thoughts or stereotypes about other ethnicities as well, But anyways, what were you going to say? Yeah.
I think it is really hard work to confront our own biases.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so for us to demand other people to do that for us when they see us almost feels like that's the wrong step to take, right? This first step.
Interesting. Jinny.
Maybe
Wow.
this is super
Okay.
controversial, but what I'm saying is let's start with us. And then, I mean, maybe it happens simultaneously, right? Like it has to happen simultaneously. I think that's the more correct way of saying this, right? Like, yes, let's demand others to see us as human beings as we also do the hard work, because it is hard, of seeing all other groups as human beings, right? Um, yeah, we know the pains of what it's like to be stereotyped and flattened as a 2D person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we know that pain, shouldn't that pain inform us then to do the work of how am I doing this to other people, right? But I don't think people make that connection. People are kind of just reacting out of anger, right? Like, hey, see me as a person. But let's be authentic and real in how we process that, because we do the same. And so we're seeing kind of this heightened awareness of the racism and sexism in this country, especially with COVID and, the whole like hate crimes towards the Asian American community. And I think my heart breaks, and sometimes it's really hard for me to try to pick up the pieces and put it back together to come to a point of, this is still my country and I love people here. Like, that's hard, right? But if we don't do that, then there's no hope, right? Like, it's light that has to drive out the darkness. It's love that has to cover up hate. But we're not even starting with our own selves. Like, we don't even love ourselves sometimes. So how can we make that love genuine? How can we make that love powerful and transformative when we don't know how to love well at all? Yeah. Clearly, I'm still very raw and not fully processing this. And maybe if we had this interview like a week later, maybe I would be more coherent.
No.
But what I see is also with the clients that come in too, bias is such a oppressive, evil thing. It's a very powerful thing that restricts how we live our lives as free people. And the biases, particularly when it comes to seeing other people a certain way, can be so destructive and deadly. But we all have biases, even any of the shoulds that we held in our minds, like, I think I should be this, or this is how things should be. Even that is so restrictive, right? Like, it prevents us from growing and learning and changing. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your transparency in that question. I know it came out of nowhere, but I just really wanted to hear, I think, just from a pastoral counselor, honestly, like just even like like being healthy about processing this whole situation too, and not like just kind of suppressing how we're feeling. I just wanted to just gain your perspective on it. And I my mind right now is like blown, because I'm like, yes, like what you're talking about, the biases and it having to happen simultaneously. I feel like that's where I was trying to go when I was talking to my husband, but like you were able to articulate that much better than I ever could. But yeah, that's interesting, because I think I feel sometimes like everything happens so quickly, and it's happening even quicker in the time that we're living in, right? Like social media, everything is just so fast, and my brain is just taking in all of the things that are coming up on my feed, and I feel almost like I have to feel a certain way without given the chance to actually figure out how I'm really feeling. Does that make sense? Yeah. So,
Absolutely. I think we get overwhelmed by overflux of data and opinions and thoughts, and we feel like we have to get on one train or the other. But I guess my perspective as a pastoral counselor, what I see is just a lot of pain. There's a lot of anger that's coming out, but that's clearly coming also from a place of pain and hurt. And I think as an entire country, we don't know how to sit or deal with pain very well. We become very reactive, or we try to hurt other people by saying, well, you hurt me, so I'm going to hurt you, right? It's a very kind of narrow-minded way of dealing with pain. And in fact, most people, myself included, absolutely, like I try my best to avoid pain if possible. Like, why would we run into the direction of hurt? Like that doesn't make sense. I think if we let our pain inform us and change us and heal us, then it can be really transformative and good and lead to reconciliation and understanding and compassion. Because there's a lot of pain, not just because of this incident, but just look at our country, right? Like it's just full of pain. And people not dealing with pain cause them to turn to express it in very negative, harmful ways. Yeah. And so how can we learn how to sit with our own pain and help let it transform us into a more empowered person? Yeah.
Okay, so what do you suggest would be like the first? No, because like not all of us can have the, are able to meet with the pastoral counselor, someone that's trained like yourself. Do you have any suggestions for, like, there's a lot of young people listening right now, and do you have any like suggestions on how to even begin this process?
This process
Of addressing the pain and being able to work through it and come to a place where, like.
I think it's important to distinguish between letting the pain inform you versus indulging the pain, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Right? Like,
that makes sense, yes.
Yeah, because a lot of people just kind of ignore pain or sweep things that are unpleasant under the rug, right? And like we're not even dealing with it. And so when they hear mental health professionals say, let's feel some of this, some people tend to kind of overindulge in the feeling, right? That just goes saturate themselves in this, and they kind of sometimes get lost in that. But I think what I'm saying is, let's confront the pain. Let's kind of let the pain tell us the message of what that we need to hear, really. So, for example, let's take this incident the shooting that happened a couple of days ago. I felt pain in that, right? Oh, people who look like me and are my gender were targeted out of someone's hatred or discontent with, like, well, whatever it is, right? And so for me, that felt like, wow, I don't feel safe, right? Like I am not seen in the full complexity of who I am in the eyes of mainstream American society sometimes. And that's painful because I don't feel seen and heard as a person, but I am, as Asian women tend to be, like hypersexualized or, seen as objects of something. And as I sit in that pain, I realized, okay, what are the reasons why people might see it this way? And because of my education, all of this, like, I'm able to kind of pull together, like, oh, past imperial colonialist thought, post-colonial, whatever theory, all this stuff. But most people don't have access to that, right? Like they have to kind of sit in that feeling. I think it's really helpful to kind of remember, well, what are my own experiences of having felt that? So one example that came to me as I was processing this pain is when I was in middle school and I was walking to the mall with another Korean American friend. All these like cars that passed by were like, jeering at us or, like honking horns and like screaming racist things. And I'm like, wow, I remember that pain. So this is something I've lived with, for the decades I've been living in this country. And so this isn't just a random new thing. This is a push in the button of what's always been there, right? Like the microaggressions I felt, the side comments of racism that were thrown my way in my interactions with other people. And to give it value, right? Like that did suck and that was painful. What kind of response do I want to have when that happens in the future? So the pain doesn't go unprocessed, right? Like if we don't process the pain, and let's say I get another random racist comment, then I think it's easy to get really angry and be like, curse them out, right?
Right, yeah.
But to kind of actually understand how I feel and how leads me to almost sadness, right? Like I am sad that this is happening. Then to kind of channel in my support system, whether it's other people or my faith, or even trusting my own self to say, how do I comfort and soothe my own sadness and pain in this? How can my community join me in this journey of painful realizations and the need for change? How can I then maybe make, I don't know, donations? Like, how can I change this into action, positive action? Like donations to organizations that address this in a more political level, or, like a way to change the systemic racism and sexism that we are experiencing, so that we feel more empowered to do something rather than sitting in the pain and reacting. We need to process it. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that is extremely powerful if every single person was able to do this, right? And process in that way. I mean, even myself, I'm like, okay, like I need to do this today. A little more healthily. I mean, and I'm going to be just a little bit more about myself. I think what comes to mind specifically is my own children, right? Like as a mom, it has affected me, I think, even in a different way than maybe some of my friends that are single or not married, and it's, I think about my kids and I'm like, what do I need to do? Like, what do I do? And but yeah, I feel like what you just said and kind of laid out, for me, in itself was very helpful. To kind of put some action to how I'm feeling.
I think most of us in our community, I could be wrong, so I don't want to generalize too much, but a lot of us have never had the guidance of how to process our feelings. It wasn't something that we learned in school. It's not priority in our homes most of the time. It's mostly, how do I become successful, right? Or how do I support my parents later on? Or, like, how do I decide on a career in the future? But our emotions are such a big part that can inform us and give us wisdom and clarity moving forward. But yeah, I don't think we had a lot of opportunities or resources to help us understand how to process it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, especially, having kids, how can we give our next generation the space and guidance for them to process their feelings in a much healthier way that we never got?
Yes. That's definitely how I've been feeling, like what do I need to do differently? Than my parents did. And not to say they did anything wrong. It's just,
they did the best they could.
Yeah, they did the best they could. And I just want to do the best that I can too, in this, for this next generation, and even in just where I am at today, as a person, how I can be better in that capacity for them as a mother. And, something interesting that you said was that we didn't, not everyone, just a lot of us didn't have that kind of space. And I feel as we're talking that you are you are creating that space for people. And I'm curious, are there a lot of Korean American pastoral counselors like that is there like a network of people like you or
Yeah, I'm really sad to say no. I'm very lonely in this field.
Mm.
The colleagues I do have are the people that went through the same doctorate program as me, but a lot of them decided to use that degree not to focus on counseling, but remain as whether pastors at a church or they're not Korean Americans, so they are using those skills not for this community, right, but for in other areas. And so it's yeah, a very small field, I must say.
Okay, well, okay, so for someone listening right now, like, and maybe they're Korean American or Asian American, and they have interest maybe in what it is that you do and what you're saying. Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, I think it starts with your own journey. So for me, being in this program forced me almost, and it didn't feel like it was forced, but I was kind of thrust upon this journey of my own healing and formation. And I think so much of what I do is a reflection of how I came out of that journey or still on that journey. And so people who are interested in kind of doing what I'm doing or even just being in some kind of any helping profession, right? And what it means to be real and bring change in their lives has to go on this journey yourself, right? Like go get some therapy or counseling or whatever, like do the work and see how you are transformed yourself. And then as you see that happening, there are a lot of programs you can use to be trained as a counselor, not necessarily a pastoral counselor, but that will give you the background for the theory and the skills that you need. But I think ultimately at the end of the day, it comes down to authenticity. You as the caregiver, counselor, if you don't feel real to your clients, they're not going to come back. They want that human connection.
Yeah.
And to know, have you gone through something like that? Have you done the hard work yourself? I know a lot of counselors who absolutely like go through the program, get the degree, but some of them, this is actually in my research, one of my clients said this. The other counselors I went to, they feel like they're just going through a checklist and they're asking me what my symptoms are. And then these are the interventions that they were taught to do. So that it seems more rigid and it didn't fit her, right? For example. But if the counselor themselves have done that work themselves, they are honest with how they process their own feelings and relationships, that shows, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, you're given life. Let's make it count. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said that better myself. So Jenny, can I ask, so does that mean you yourself go to a counselor too?
Yeah. I went to see a therapist for about 6 years. And after those 6 years, I decided that a spiritual director is a better choice as I move forward. So to be open to trying different things, right? So for those 6 years, my therapist was great. I really grew a lot, healed a lot, made a lot of connection and insights on myself. Then as I moved forward, she wasn't trained theologically, and I felt like my faith side was kind of missing in the conversation. My relationship with God and how I want to love people didn't really, yeah, there was not much room for that kind of conversation that felt like propelling and moving me forward. I sought out a spiritual director, and so I've been seeing her for about 9 years now. So it
Oh,
kind of overlapped, right? And so that's been great. I see her regularly, and she has seen me through the years of how I've changed, and she celebrated with me, cried with me, and yeah, it's been wonderful.
wow. Yeah. I mean, I do feel, and I'm sure you're not unaware of this, but there is, a stigma, I feel like, that goes
Mm,
with
mm,
counseling in the Asian American community. I can only speak to the Korean American community, honestly, just because I'm Korean American myself. I have, I I don't see a counselor, but I am very much an advocate for it,
mm,
and uh, can see the so many actually only pros that come from it.
mm,
Just the healing that you've been talking about through our time together. But I uh like I have found that when I suggest it to somebody, like professional counseling in my
mm-hmm,
community, like if they're just not ready, it just
mm-hmm.
seems like they're not like it, there's no.
Yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying? Like there's no they're if they're not ready to hear it, they don't hear it, you know? So what is that? They're just not they don't want help, or they're just
Mm.
prideful or stubborn? Like do you
The way I see it is timing in their lives.
Mm,
I think we all have seasons of life, and there will come a season, I think, where we feel that we don't have the resources to get us through this season. Other seasons may be like, oh, I'm going to fall back on my familiar patterns of coping or survival, and it's not going to be horrible. And so it may not be healthy necessarily, but it gets people by and gets people through those seasons. And so,
mm,
sure, counseling can absolutely be helpful, but if they're not open to it and it's not the right time, then it's not going to work for them.
yeah.
But I think there comes a time where whether it could like tragic events or an actual like a curiosity or openness of I want to grow and change, but I don't know how to do that by myself.
Yeah.
And so it's recognizing what season people are in their lives and if they are receptive to it. And if they are receptive to it, then to kind of strike when the iron is hot.
Yeah.
Like that
Right.
inkling, go for it.
Exactly, exactly. Oh
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
Well, before we end our time together, Jenny, I've truly enjoyed it. I've learned so much, and I myself already feel like I've been to therapy. But I'm curious to know, I feel like could you kind of tell me what it is, maybe like one thing you really enjoy about what you do, and then maybe, or actually, let's start with one thing you don't enjoy, like
Mm,
the
mhm.
challenging thing or something you just don't like about the job, and then maybe we can sum it up with and conclude with the thing that you do like about your
Yeah.
job.
So one thing I find challenging is constantly being faced with my limitations.
Mm.
Um, realizing, oh, I don't have as much power or control over the lives of the people that I'm seeing. I am not the expert of their lives. They are. So no matter how many theories or what I think is wonderful insight that I throw at them,
Mm-hmm.
they could be like, nope. That's not it. That's not helpful. Um, no, but to be more serious, I think it's about acknowledging my own humanness and
Mm.
limits. And that constantly comes with me confronting my pride and ego that we all have, right? And so when I see a client that maybe is not working out, I have to admit to myself, I'm not the person to help them. I need to
Mm.
refer them to someone who is more attuned and well, better matched with a better set of skills for this kind of person,
I
right?
see.
And so, coming from someone who's always kind of been super productive and high achieving, that was a very freeing concept to grasp, but it's a struggle to constantly be reminded of how limited I am. Yeah,
Right. Yeah,
like
no, I would
be very
imagine
humble.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that would be challenging for me myself as well. Even today with my own children, I'm like, why?
Uh-huh.
Like, I know things.
It's a constant surrendering that I
Right.
must do. Yeah.
That's so funny. Okay.
Sometimes I'm like,
Okay.
God, I think I surrendered enough. I have
Yeah.
no ego left. And God's like, nope, there's more. Keep
Oh goodness.
surrendering. Like, yep, here it is. Yeah. But what I love is witnessing how people change.
Mm.
And kind of connected to what is challenging for me is knowing that I am not the one creating that change, but seeing that whether it's their faith or God leading that change, or these people kind of owning their lives now rather than being passive, reactive to it, they are proactive agents who are creating lives that they want to live. You know, it's a very powerful thing to witness, and it's
So
very inspiring.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no, absolutely. Sorry, something kind of triggered as you were talking.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, really, you're just giving your clients the tools,
Mm-hmm.
right, that they
Absolutely.
need to kind of healthily get through, not get through, but live their lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that
Yeah.
sounds amazing. Everyone, go to pastoral counseling, please.
The secret that no one seems to kind of know is that we have the tools within us. It's a
Hmm.
matter of dusting out all the bad set of patterns that we have used that prevent us from using those tools. Because every single one of us inside has this kind of desire for growth and wanting to be better and healthier. And yeah, there's even a theory of if you just get out of the way, people will just blossom. Right? If we get rid of our defenses
Mm-hmm.
and stop trying to control everything, then what naturally happens is we grow. So, what are these kind of roadblocks that we may have to remove and get out of the way? Then it naturally happens. I think God created all of us to naturally heal and grow and transform. I mean, look at nature, right? Like a
Yeah.
garden. Sure, we can pull out the weeds, but really, what are we actually doing to make the flowers grow? It's
Mm.
natural. Yeah. That's
That is
kind of how it
so
works with our
beautiful,
hearts.
Jinny. I'm not, that was, oh, gosh, you're so great. No,
Oh,
I mean,
thank
I know I
you.
sound like kind of sarcastic, but I'm being completely genuine right now. Um, man,
Yeah.
thank you. I just, I really loved our time together today. Thank you
Mm,
so much for your rawness and your transparency with my questioning today. And hey, guys, if you're listening right now and you have interest in the career in pastoral counseling, feel free to reach out to me. Jinny's, as she mentioned, she's a pretty busy person, but I feel like with the shortage of Asian American counselors in general, she would make space. Uh, am I wrong to say
Absolutely.
that, Jenny? Sorry to
Oh,
put that on you.
no, of course not. I would be happy, yeah, to answer
That
questions or anything that comes up.
That's great. Yeah. So, guys, you heard it here. Please feel free to reach out, DM me, or email me at podcastwigu@gmail.com, and I can get you connected. Jenny, thank you so much again. It was an honor.
Thank you so much, Blair. I also want to say that in preparation for our time, I had this amazing time of looking back on how I've gotten here in my life. And so,
Mm.
because of this interview, I feel like I had this opportunity to reevaluate my midlife because I'm pretty old. So, like, half my life, I'm like, wow. And to
Mm.
see how things came together and ended up where I am. And most of it we didn't talk about. So the interview doesn't even matter. I am just thankful for this process.
Oh man, no, I'm sorry. What didn't I cover?
Not,
I want to hear.
Maybe at a different time. But yeah, it's just a beautiful opportunity for me to realize even personal pain, communal pain can lead to empowerment. I think that's the theme that I kind of found as I was preparing for our time together. Yeah, pain doesn't have to be something we react to. It can be a powerful tool to help us bring change.
Wow, thank you for that. And thank you for sharing with me. I'm really encouraged by that too, because, you know, for me personally, this is just a platform to yes, inform people about career opportunities and what they can do with their lives and how they can be purposeful and how God created them with a purpose. And, you know, my hope is to just provide a resource for people to kind of exercise, you know, that process of trying to figure it out. But also it's been such a joy for me to hear stories like what you just said, you know, for people to realize there was a process and everything is in God's plan, you know, and
nothing is wasted. That's something I say all the time. Nothing that we go through is a waste.
Even the pain, the pain. Yes.
Yeah.
And man, I mean, right now I'm just like in total like, man, there probably is so much pain I need to address. But just don't, because who likes pain? But that's for another podcast, I think.
Yes, we've just merely scratched the surface.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you again. And until next time, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.